Good day, this is NSC 302, Environmental Health. I'll be taking you through study section 1, Introduction to Environmental Health. Learning outcomes of study section 1. When you have studied this section, you should be able to define and explain the disciplines that contribute to environmental health. You should be able to explain the factors, themes, and emerging issues that affect healthy environment. And lastly, you should be able to explain environmental health risk and the ways of improving environmental risk. Environmental health is the branch of public health that is concerned with all aspects of the natural and built environment that may affect human health. Other terms referring to concerning environmental health are environmental public health and public health protection, or environmental health protection and environmental protection. Environmental health and environmental protection are very much related. Environmental health is focused on the natural and built environment for the benefit of human health, whereas environmental protection is concerned with protecting the natural environment for the benefit of human health and the ecosystem. Environmental health addresses all the physical, chemical, and biological factors external to a person and all the related factors impacting behaviors. It encompasses the assessment and control of those environmental factors that can potentially affect health. It is targeted towards preventing disease and creating health supportive environment. This definition excludes behavior not related to environment, as well as behavior related to the social and cultural environment, as well as genetics. Environmental health is defined by the World Health Organization, WHO, as those aspects of the human health and disease that are determined by factors in the environment. It also refers to the theory and practice of assessing and controlling factors in the environment that can potentially affect health. Let's move on as we discuss the disciplines that contribute to the fields of environmental health. There are three basic disciplines that contribute generally to the field of environmental health, and these are environmental epidemiology, toxicology, and exposure science. Each of these disciplines contributes different information to describe problems in environmental health. So let's discuss them one after the other by first of all discussing environmental epidemiology. The environmental epidemiology studies the relationship between environmental exposures, including exposure to chemicals, radiation, microbiology agents, and so on and so forth, and human health. Observational studies, which simply observe exposures that people have already experienced, are uncommon in environmental epidemiology because humans cannot ethically be exposed to agents that are known or suspected to cause disease. While the inability to use experimental study designs is a limitation of environmental epidemiology, this discipline directly observes effects on human health rather than estimating effects from animal study. Let's talk about toxicology. Toxicology studies how environmental exposures lead to specific health outcomes, generally in animals, as a means to understand possible health outcomes in humans. Toxicology has the advantage of being able to conduct randomized controlled trials and other experimental studies because they can use animal subjects. However, there are many differences in animal and human biology, and there can be a lot of uncertainty when interpreting the results of animal studies for their implications for human The last on the list is exposure science. Exposure science studies human exposure to environmental contaminants by both identifying and quantifying exposures. Exposure science can be discussed as support environmental epidemiology by better describing environmental exposures that may lead to a particular health outcome. Identify common exposures whose health outcomes may be better understood through a toxicology study and can be used in a risk assessment to determine whether current levels of exposure might exceed recommended levels. Exposure science has the advantage of being able to very accurately quantify exposures to specific chemicals, but it does not generate any information about health outcomes like environmental epidemiology or toxicology. Let's move on as we study the factors that affect health environment. Maintaining a healthy environment is central to increasing quality of life and years of healthy life. Globally, nearly 25% of all death and the total diseases burden can be attributed to environmental factors. Poor environmental quality has its greatest impact on people whose health status is already at risk. Therefore, environmental health must address the societal and environmental factors that increase the likelihood of exposure and diseases. Environmental factors are diverse and far-reaching. They include, number one, exposure to hazardous substances in the air, water, soil, and food. Also, natural and technological disasters. Number three, physical hazards. Number four, nutritional deficiencies. And lastly, the built environment. Themes of environmental health. Environmental health objectives focus on 6 themes, each of which highlights an element of environmental health, and they can be listed as outdoor air quality, surface and groundwater quality, toxic substances and hazardous waste, homes and communities, infrastructures and surveillance, and lastly, global environmental health. So let's discuss this one after the other. Outdoor air quality. Poor air quality is linked to premature death, cancer, and long-term damage to respiratory and cardiovascular systems. Decreasing air pollution is an important step in creating a healthy environment. The second on the list, in the theme of environmental health, we have surface and groundwater. Surface and groundwater applies to both drinking and recreational waters. Contamination by infectious agents or chemicals can cause mild to severe illness. Protecting water sources and minimizing exposure to contaminated water sources are important parts of environmental health. What about toxic substance and hazardous waste? The health effects of toxic substance and hazardous waste are not yet fully understood. Research to better understand how these exposures may impact health is ongoing. Meanwhile, efforts to reduce exposures continue. Reducing exposure to toxic substance and hazardous waste is fundamental to environment health. And lastly, we have home and communities. People spend most of their time at work or school. Some of this environment expose people to indoor pollution, inadequate heating and sanitation, structural problems, electrical and fire hazard, lead-based paint hazard, and this hazard can impact health and safety. Maintaining healthy homes and community is essential to environment health. So these are just some of the explanation of the themes of environmental health. let's talk about environmental health risk. Environmental health risks are factors outside of the body that affect a person's well-being and influence their behavior. Examples include the quality of a person's air, food, and water supply, or their exposure to hazardous materials. Preventing or reducing the risk of illness, injury, or diseases and the community is essential to good environmental health. The term environmental health refers to many different factors in a person's surrounding. Environmental health covers many different factors in a person's surroundings, and this can include air pollution, water quality, food quality, chemicals, metals, disease for animals and insects, infectious diseases, natural hazard, non-made structures, occupational health, climate and climate change. Improving governmental health. Governmental and community environmental health programs aim to improve public health in a number of key areas, and these key areas can be listed as emergencies, natural disasters, water supply, increased urban development, and lastly, health services for Aboriginal communities. I hope you have learned one or two things in this study section, and I do hope that you will continue to learn more as you proceed in the subsequent study sections. Thanks for listening.